you all hear me in the back? So we're gonna start. This here is poetry. This here is my life. And every day I write like my life is on the line. If writing poetry was a crime, then take me to trial. If I couldn't write, they consider me DOA, dead on arrival. Every day I write because this is my means of survival. This here is not a joke. Every time I lay pen to paper, the parchment smokes. And for those poets who ain't worthy of my gifts, they choke. Now pause, you poetry pretenders, and clear your throat. When I bless this mic, I'm gonna leave it in a better condition because I am on a mission. And for those real poets, those true poets that's really been listening, they understand exactly where I'm coming from. And for those fake in front, ego tripping, Starbucks sipping wannabe poets, anytime you thank you, come get some. I don't know how to pass this poetry test because I wrote it. This here was the truth because I spoke it, and not I didn't just blaze this mic, I smoked it. Thank y'all. So, as you may know, I am a spoken word artist. And last year in 2016, I had the opportunity to travel to Dakar, Senegal with Roots and Wings, which is a group of 9 performers, poets, dancers, songwriters, rappers, and we were able to go to Dakar, Senegal for 2 weeks. It was actually my first time getting a passport and my first time leaving the country. I never imagined in a million years, my first time leaving the country as an African-American woman, that I would be heading back to or going to Africa. I've heard and seen all the commercials about Africa, but I never saw Africa in real life for myself. So that's me in Dakar, and I absolutely love it. And truly, I don't know, you guys are a little bit young, but the Lion King says there's more to see than can ever be seen. And truly there was more to see than could ever be seen in Dakar. So we saw zebras and giraffes and cows just walking down the street. For real. Chickens and horses, like horses were on the highway with cars. And in the bottom 2 pictures, this is fruit from the baobab tree. And the next picture with the food, I can't remember what that is, but a woman was telling her friend in Wolof, explain to her what this is in English. And he said, I can't explain it to her because it doesn't grow in America. So I thought that's pretty dope. So, so I got to see this statue is the African Resistance Monument, Renaissance Monument, I'm sorry. You can actually go into the crown of the father, which is called a kufi. You can go into his head and look down onto Dakar, and I was able to do that. It is actually 1.5 times bigger than the Statue of Liberty. And I'm here to talk about equity and creativity. And so the curator of the museum told us the son, if the baby there is the boy, if you were to draw a line from where he's pointing to America, his finger points to the face of the Statue of Liberty. And he said that it's signifying, bring my people back home. My daughter, this is my daughter here, she was actually able to go to Dakar, Senegal with us. And we went to Gorée Island, which is also known as the House of Slaves. And we are both standing in the door of no return. And this is where Africans were kept. And I've never really talked about this part with anyone because I get a little emotional. But this is where Africans were kept before they would get on the ships to come to America. They estimate that about 200,000 Africans passed through this door. Of course, they call it the door of no return because once you went through that door, no one knew where you were going, and of course you did not return back to Africa. And so where that door is, there are rooms in the basement for women, young girls, infants, and men. And all of them are kept separated. And so my daughter, she went in the room for young girls and just was screaming and crying. And underneath these stairs, there is a door where they would just shove slaves in that door, and they don't know how many could fit in that room, but their only job was to make sure that the door closed. Up top here is where the slave masters stayed. So if you can imagine, just like right below all the screaming and crying and heartache, and just right above that is where the slave masters would stay before they took you out of this door. So in Senegal, I was able to, and these are members of Roots and Wings, and that's me in the front, the red shirt, I'm always in the front, I'm like the Beyonce of the group. So my daughter's there in the pink dress, but we were able to get our African names. And I'm sure in your studies you'll have learned that most Africans that did come to America were given Americanized names, but we were able to get our African names. My name is Binta, which means truth teller. And my friend Pierre, she was on the trip, and she said, the world is so much better when you can see yourself in it. So this was the first time when I went to Senegal that I actually saw myself in the world. And y'all can see how happy I was. I was real happy. And so I saw art, and I saw angels with braids, and I saw these billboards with black people on them, and I just was so excited to look around and just like see me. And I remember I was in a shop and I wanted to get some earrings and that I was going to send to my mom, but I kept it. And I was shopping, and I was so used to, in America, people watching me while I shop. So I was holding the earrings out so the shop owner would not think I was going to steal them. And so I realized when I looked up that the shop owner was outside of the shop talking to someone on the street. She wasn't even thinking about me. And so I finally realized, like, the weight of carrying, the weight of just being black. And I didn't have to think about my color, or people thinking I'm trying to steal something, or being profiled, or being concerned about driving somewhere, or being in the wrong neighborhood. And I knew, unfortunately, that I was gonna have to come back to America. And so I was here for 2 weeks, which is 336 hours. So for 336 hours, I actually felt like a free person, where when we finally got there, we thought we should have like taken our blood pressure and our stats before and while we were there and when we came back. Because when we had left, there had just been 2 fatal police shootings, and when I returned to America, there was this policy at Butler High School in Louisville where, although they didn't explicitly say black kids, you were not allowed to wear cornrows, you were not allowed to have an afro, and I thought, well, this is not fair. And so when I came back to America, it's like I was faced with the same things that was going on when I left. And so for about a week, I stayed in bed, I kept my blinds drawn, and I didn't know where I fit in here anymore. And everywhere I went, I brought back these items, and I brought back this sand from Goree Island, and I would give it to people, and they were just amazed that I gave them something from Africa, and I had bracelets, and I would just hand them to anyone, and I just wanted everyone for a moment just to experience what it's like not to be the other person, to actually feel like you fit in somewhere in the world. And I wanted them to know there is a place where you can fit in. But I knew that as much as I would want to, I couldn't pack everybody up and take them back to Senegal. So I thought, how can I create that feeling in Louisville. And so I did my official poll on Facebook, and I asked people, is there any place in Louisville outside of like your home or your family's house or your friend's house where you feel like you can just be you? You don't have to worry about the way you look or what you're wearing or your hair or your skin color. You can just be who you are. And overwhelmingly, all of my friends said no, they didn't have a spot in Louisville where they felt like they could just be who they were. So I thought, well, it's my job to create this space. So I really started looking at spaces and how we design spaces and how we create spaces and how we create things that make people feel like outcasts. So I wondered how I could take everything that I felt and everything that I learned in Senegal and how I felt and make people in the community that I work in Smoketown, which is an underserved community, predominantly African American, feel like they belong here. Because that neighborhood, it's 150 years old, but it's often called the forgotten neighborhood of Louisville. So I started to really think about this, is that we have to create intentionally with the goal of being inclusionary and not exclusionary. So I thought if I could create something, it is my job, it's our job, and especially you all coming up behind us to create things that make people feel like they belong. And it's not always going to be easy. It's going to take work, it will require out-the-box thinking, and it's not always going to be the most lucrative position. I remember I was watching a Facebook video, and the man in the top photo is hearing impaired. You all may have seen this Facebook video. And this entire town learned sign language for him. And so he's walking around, and they have cameras all over. They've done this strategically for him, but he's not in on it. And people will bump into him or something, and then they'll say sorry in sign language. At the end of this video, he just started crying because for a moment in time, he was not the other person. And so I also watched Shark Tank. I love Shark Tank. And I love this guy, Johnny, who made these teepees for trees. And they kind of ridiculed him because he wanted to sell them for cheap. He was only making $1 per teepee. And they asked him, why don't you raise the price? If it does what you say it does, which saved thousands of gallons of water for every tree. And he said, I'm working with farmers, and like farmers are the cornerstone of America. And so I don't want to gouge them on a price just because I can. I also thought about the EpiPen maker who raised their price to $600, and then CVS stepped in and said, we can make that for cheaper and make it for just a little bit over $100. So it may not always be the most lucrative thing, but you'll like be able to sleep at night. So creating through a lens of equity, does what you create allow for fairness, justice, and impartiality? So that's my daughter. She loves to play Halo. And I said, are any of the lead characters female? And she said no. And so I'm like, girls can kick butt too. And boys can cook. Like, it's okay. It's okay to design things that everybody can use. Create in a way that does not make people feel like the other. When we were able to change our emojis to color, I was having a good time. I changed them all, but still I want to ask Apple, why can I change my emoji to color that's a family? So are you telling me I can be everything but a family? I want them to be able to look like me. I want to send my daughter emojis that are a family because we are a family. And I remember I played Wii. I know Wii is old, but I'm not into all them video games. And I was so excited that I could make my me look like me. And so I wanted to get this workout video that was Wii Fit. And I started working out and it wasn't picking up my moves. So I called and I said, this video game doesn't work, it's not picking up my moves when I'm moving. And she told me it's not designed to pick up your skin tone. And so when you design things and create things, think about that. Also, of course, you know, this Ghost in the Shell. All they did was put a black wig on Scarlett Johansson. It's an anime movie. There are Japanese actresses that could play this role. Create in a way that can erase barriers and open up dialogues. This was wonderful for Nike to create this hijab for Muslim women that want to work out. And so Cindy had also invented this all the way back in 1999, and she did it because a Muslim girl was kicked out of gym class. In Smoketown, this is how we are creating equity and creativity. These are all the billboards in Smoketown. I got tired of looking at that and thought, how can I use poetry to reflect what I saw in Senegal? So we took pictures of community residents and we asked them, if you could say something to your neighbors, what would you want to say? And these are the messages that they gave back to us, that you are worthy. You are worthy of this community to have everything that you want. You can have lifelong friendships. We can thrive when we work together, and anything is possible with hope. So April 1st, I'm so proud to say, we get to change all of the billboards in Smoketown to positive messages of people that live there and what they actually want to say. It is our job, thank you. And let me say this real quick. I had never seen a billboard with a black person on it until I went to Senegal, where we were doing like normal people stuff. Like, we do normal things. And so I wanted this community that is predominantly African. That's my niece over there too with the barrettes in her hair. But I wanted people in this community to see themselves. And I think when you see yourself in the world, you know that anything is possible, and you have to know that you belong in this space that you are in. You are entitled to be in this space. You are worthy of being in this space. Even when it's difficult, even when it's hard, you have to kind of stand up. And sometimes, many times, I'm going to read a poem after this because I'm done. That was my last slide. But sometimes, many times, I'm invited to spaces and I know I'm going to be the only black person, or I might be the only girl. Is anybody going to want to talk to me? Even before I came out here, I text my daughter and I'm like, well, you know I'm loud. And they're pretty quiet. And she's like, Mom, you're going to be fine. And so even standing up here, I was nervous to be in this space because I always feel like the other person. And I always have to remind myself, Hannah, you're worthy of being on that stage with everybody else. So I'm going to read this poem and then I'm done. Okay? It's called Spaces. It is difficult to stand in spaces that were not designed for me, spaces that were not constructed for people that look like me, spaces that scream, you do not belong here, spaces that feel rough against my blackness, coarse, painful, and uneasy, spaces that are void of signs, but still I can see them hanging in a not so distant memory, signs that separated fountains and restaurants, blatantly reminding people that these spaces ain't made for them. And although the signs no longer remain, the architecture and atmosphere is constructed in such a way that I know and we know that these are not our spaces. We are simply standing in borrowed time to entertain the master's masses. It is difficult to stand in these spaces and be me, fully me, code-switching my vernacular to make you feel comfortable. Why does my life have to dress itself in discomfort for you to feel at ease? Why does my gender threaten you in these spaces? Why does my skin make you uncomfortable in these spaces? Why does my sexuality become a burden in these spaces? Why does my hair have to look a certain way to stand in these spaces? You see, these are spaces I no longer want to reside in. I do not enjoy these spaces. I no longer desire to subject myself to these spaces, but then I am reminded, as I see the faces of two little black girls watching me perform in awe, because I am a person with kinky hair like them and skin that looks like theirs and lips that look like theirs, standing in these spaces, Spaces that have been designed in ways that spoken to them at an early age, reminding them, baby, some spaces just ain't for your kind. You see, that is why I'm in these spaces, being a shout in these spaces for every black person that surveyed a room to see if anyone looked like them in these spaces, for every woman that stood at the head of a boardroom table wondering if she was equal in these spaces, for every LGBTQ person that wondered if they could safely be themselves in these spaces, for every Muslim woman that wondered, can I wear my hijab in these spaces? I remember that I stood in these spaces not designated for me. I remember people that marched on roads not paid for them, that sat in seats on buses not earmarked for them, that sat down at counters and endured the humiliation of standing in spaces not designed for them, so that one day I too could stand in these spaces. You see, that is why I was in these spaces, standing boldly in these spaces. It is for everyone that came before me, that sat in these spaces that made them ill at ease, that sipped water at the colored-only fountain, that stood in spaces that made them uneasy, that walked into integrated schools and knew that they would just be one of 9. You see, that is why I'm in these spaces, for everyone that will come after me, for everyone to know that they have a right to be in these spaces, to sit at a table in these spaces, to have a voice in these spaces, to have influence in these spaces. You see, that is why I'm in these spaces, even when it makes me uncomfortable, speaking boldly against injustice, even while now you sit looking at me and you feel uncomfortable, but today you have heard me. You cannot unsee me. In this space, I belong. In this space, I am here. In this space, I belong here. In this space. Thank you.